집이 저거예요. 뭐지? 바람이 안 통해요. 한쪽으로만 이렇게 뚫려 있는 집이니까 죽을 것 같은 거야.
선풍기도
네.
덥죠. 선풍기만 해도 덥죠.
뜨거운
예,
바람도
뜨거운 바람도
오지.
오죠.
근데 그러니까 막 이렇게 올라오더라고요. 그래서 이게 이렇게 심한가 했는데 한국 와서 이제 집에는 에어컨 24시간 틀거든요. 집에 에어컨
그죠,
24시간
저, 예,
틀고 그리고 여기 있고 이러니까 오히려 가라앉았어요.
아,
저 지금.
그래요?
오히려 가라앉았어.
이게 오히려 너무 열이 많이 올라서 그러실 수도
밖에 안
있겠네요.
나가니까.
예.
저랑 사무실 같이
안녕하세요.
나예라고.
안녕하세요.
반갑습니다.
싸우라고 몇 번 봤잖아요.
처음 봬요.
몇 번 봤을 텐데 아마 제가 못
잠깐.
죄송합니다. 죄송합니다. 어디서요?
So hello everyone. Yeah, today is our first session of the keynote lecture, and I'm really honored to introduce and having Sao Kim as our keynote lecturer. So Sao Kim is actually, I think most of you already heard about Sao Kim from Instagram, or so he's kind of very worldwide famous. And then he graduated SciArc, and then he studied at Harvard GSD after that. And now he's doing very unique process of design methodology. So I think it's going to be a really great chance to understand his design methodology and his process of the thinking as well. So I hope you're enjoying this keynote lecture. Yeah. So I want to introduce Sao Kim.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the kind introduction. Today I will be covering some of my projects and practice from the age of social media and how it has enabled this market for the unbuilt to become a new way of practicing architecture. I understand that this workshop everyone's working within the topic of the compressed city to be specific Seoul, but my practice has been completely the opposite actually. Where the projects exist mostly on screen, online, and it's not humanistic or site-specific. It's more personal than social. But I'll try to make it interesting for everyone. So this is a project that gave me my career actually. But in order to track the story behind this, I had to go back to where I started at the school. In my second semester at the GSD in 2020, I took Max Scoggin and Meryl Elam's studio. And it was really a project that was unique because it was on self-discovery. They've been doing that studio for almost 20 years, and they put an emphasis on the fact that successful architects out there have the ability to discover their innate interests and have been owning and practicing those interests in order for them to become unique individuals. And it is through the analysis of one's life experiences to fully comprehend and discover oneself in order to set a right direction for their own architectural discourse. So I always talk about this graph, which is important to understand in terms of positioning oneself within the discipline. So there's the graph for thinking versus graph for expression. So ontological versus phenomenological, which is a way of thinking, versus minimalism versus formalism, which is about the forms of expression. And I play some of the architects that I've studied when I was in school, and we can argue about the positioning, but it's not that important. The important part was for me to understand where I was positioned personally. So I start to track back my own path from the journey that I took back in 2013. That was my first year in architecture school, and to now. So I realized this type of shift not only because of my own shifting interests, but also because of the environmental factors. So I grew up in Singapore, moved to America, and then now I'm back in Korea. So all of these different institutions had different discipline. So I think those really affected the way I think about architecture. And there's a reason why I landed on this specific square. It's because I met Graham Harman at SciArc. Graham Harman is a philosopher. He was, I think, at the University of Cairo at the time, but right before I graduated, he came to SciArc. The four philosophers and theorists here, they are the one who talked about speculative realism, which was at the time an avant-garde way of thinking about philosophy. And Graham Harman was doing something more specific within architecture, so he was able to teach at SciArc. To simply put this comparison between humanism versus speculative realism, humanism focuses on a conscious mind as an understanding of the world. So there's a single conscious human being that understands other people, objects, systems, and constructs. And then versus the speculative realism, which is a way of thinking that every single realities are actually independent of one another, and they do not need to exist in order to prove each other's existence. So this was an interesting idea that was kind of a hot topic at SCI-Arc. I've used Midjourney to give me images that represent these two philosophical stances. On the left side, you can see a human conscious human mind, a single human mind that contains all of the understanding of the world through their personal perceptions and senses. And rather, on the right side, the opposite, all of these kind of realities are not contained within a single human mind. Rather, it's actually defined as an independent entity. Among this idea of speculative realism, there's a more focused version for object, which is called object-oriented ontology. We call this the triple O. And a lot of architects at the time, when I was at SCI-Arc, they also tried to pursue this philosophical stance as a design methodology. And they argued that objects exist independently of human perception and cannot be fully understood or defined by their relations to humans or to other objects. So they use formal expression that seem a little too foreign to the public's eyes, and using found elements that's not necessarily adapted to their function. So criticism on this movement was obviously that it lacked practicality and also served extremely little function to the society. And of course, it also could not escape completely out of the root philosophy that they were fighting against, which is correlationism, which is the link between thinking and being. So, and lastly, they kind of look terrible, honestly, because the triple architects, they weren't trying to impress the public. They were just studying the nature of objects. So it seems like the only way to design a triple O building was to not let a human being design it. That seemed to be the only solution. So I took a different route, having seen this type of rise and fall of triple O. I wanted to still utilize this idea of a triple O, and I was branching it out even further to flat ontology, which eliminates the hierarchical order of things within objects. This means that I can analyze different elements within an object by its formal characteristics, rather than being focused on the preconceived notion and the purpose that led to the invention of these elements. Two things that I wanted to kind of relate to my personal interest, which is relation to self versus relationship to others. Other meaning other independent entities. And the first idea that I wanted to portray for my own projects was singularity. It defines the state of being one, using one element to create a versatile structure. It also relates to the idea of reduction, which means that we're trying to reduce the number of elements present in the scene in order to make a single structure versatile. Here's an example of that. This is a full series by Olivier Grégoire. So the designer is using a sheet of material to fold it into different types of chairs. There's a bench and a chair. And what's interesting here is that normally when we look at a chair, it has multiple elements to it. So there's a backrest, the seat, the structure. All these elements are basically, they basically disappeared because a single sheet of material was able to take over the function of others. And that I thought was kind of interesting, having something that was designed to be versatile and also having reduced down to its very core, very nature. Second topic deals with the relationship to others. I named it anti-conformity. It's the interaction between multiple independent parts that defy conventional assembly method. And I thought about this because when we look at hierarchical, classical hierarchy of order in architecture, we always think about certain types of elements being present in specific manner within specific hierarchical order. And I thought that within the realm of flat ontology, they all should have their equal importance. And the way they come together should not be just conventional. It had to defy the conventional method. So the whole point was to assemble things in the wrong way. And in the realm of assembly, we always talk about this idea of fit. So how does things fit into one another? There's the perfect fit, loose fit, and tight fit. A perfect example of a perfect fit would be Crown Hall by Mies van der Rohe. There is a shape of a box that provides the spaces, and then there's this shape of that structural elements that's pushed outside that wraps around it. Perfect conformity made for one another. And this probably applies to every single one of the buildings out there. And something that's going a little bit out of that realm to the category of misfit is loose fit. So in this public toilet in Japan, there's 4 different types of rings. And you can see that they're hierarchical in size, nested within one another, but they're kind of pushed into one direction. So if you enter from the left side, let's say, you just have to cross one layer to get into the center. Versus if you go from the right side, and if you were able to cross all of those layers somehow, you would have to cross four layers. So this simple gesture is giving a formal manipulation that allowed of expansion of time and space on the right side, while it's compressing and reducing down the space and time on the left side. So I thought this type of phenomenon was also quite interesting. Lastly, tight fit. This is Nordic Pavilion at Expo 70 Osaka, and architects trying to use 2 elastic massing to forcefully fit them under a roof. So it's about creating architecture that's also malleable, that can react to the existence of one another. Another example would be the responsive house by Isozaki. At SCI-Arc, we always talked about this narrative between the container and the contained, and when the contained become a little too much filled, it starts to morph the container. And where does it end? And what's in between those spaces? We call it the glue space as well. And the 2 categorized as misfit. And during my undergraduate degree, we came up with another one that we can call cross-contamination. This is a diagram model of an N house by So Fujimoto, where layers are hierarchical in size, extremely consistent, conforming to one another. So the hierarchy is consistent, and we try to make an object extruded layer in an unconventional way so that it can strategically fit into one another in such a way that the layer can break free from its hierarchy, now switching the way you think about layers and spaces. So when we put a piece of circulation in between this thing, we start to notice what the layers and boundaries, how the layers and boundaries are working here. One person can walk up between layer number 1 and 2 and then end up somehow in between layer number 2 and 3. So this type of phenomena that can alter the spaces by crossing their discipline was very interesting to us. Another branch of interest of mine had been space-time, but the more literal space-time. So it's something that a lot of architects have been kind of romanticizing for years, and they are just plays about gravity. So there's an anti-gravity that deals with the idea of levitation, and then the opposite of that, having exaggerated or accelerated gravity that can be categorized as ruination. Because I think this specific period of time was quite interesting. The race for the moon between the Soviet Union and the Americans. During this 13 years, the first event being the first satellite by the Russia launched into space, and the first successful moon landing mission. So between the 13 years, there were lots of changes to the way we imagined how the future of architecture is drawn. So this is a house that was envisioned as the futuristic house. It's back in 1959, and it's titled the Follow the Sun House. So it's all imagined in such a way that it reflects the space age. The disc-shaped roof, the circular kind of platform, orientationless tripod landing, all these antenna, all these elements literally are taken from the idea of space age. And people imagined architecture to be something like this. But the point was that the house would sit on this thing and follow the sun for maximum sunlight. And other cartoons as well, this was in 60s, their architecture is being portrayed in such a way that they can start to become a little more weightless. It's also orientationless, and I thought that this was also a change that we're kind of admiring how, envisioning and admiring the space age. Some of them came true to become a real building. This is the theme building at LAX, and of course, Futuro House that we see everywhere. But a more contemporary and realistic version of solving this problem, I thought it was in this project. So this public toilet is also in Japan. Very simple concrete box, slightly lifted above the ground and then set back inwards so that it appears to be floating. But what's interesting here is not just the box itself, but the comparison to what's right next to it, which is the station. The station is also made with concrete box, and the escalator going downwards almost suggests that the concrete box is buried underground. And this gesture of having that two opposing, kind of juxtaposing the two together was quite interesting to me. And of course, there's not any trick, kind of structural trickery to this. There's just a huge beam, and then there's a part here. There's a part here on the second section that has a thinning kind of tapering kind of wall in order to save the weight. So on the other hand, we have ruination, which deals with the idea of a ruin, but not finding ruins, but actually designing one. So if we look back at the history of moments of finding these little ancient ruins, like the Stonehenge or Easter Island heads, like they always triggered the narrative. They were found at the state that they were in a ruin, so they were in a disoriented state or partially underground or partially revealed. And this is not a ruin, but it also had the same idea that it was partially revealed underground. And people are making memes like this to complete the entire story. So I thought that the true power of these designing a ruin came from the way it can let the viewers complete the story for them. And another one that has a strong impact, I think, Flooded Modernity. This is a work by an artist who was criticizing the legacy of modernism and how it should be treated by literally sinking the Villa Savoye in the water. And of course, this is an extremely radical way of showing and criticizing that. But I'm more interested in the trickery behind, where like how do they make it appear that way? So these were things that I wanted to try to convey in my own works. So this all came together to become something that I'm working still today. My entire career came from this design series titled Architecture Anomaly. I began making design objects out of pure curiosity and for myself to really understand what I was interested in and applying some of the things that I've learned in different environments that I grew up in, forming a list of expressions that might become something unique to myself. So this is a manifestation of all of my architectural thoughts. I'm not a person of process, and I'm more interested in what it looks like at the end, and whether or not they convey the idea that I wish to convey eventually. So when I look back at these works, they're not exactly consistent. I could see that my interests are shifting constantly, and my own beliefs get renewed every now and then. So I never think of these works as final products, but merely records of ideas. And there are no constraints in this series. I'm not bound by any human construct of what architecture should or shouldn't be. So there's no site, no program, no user, only just focusing on the idea. I'm only thinking about the thing in itself and their meaning of their existence. So in the series, the design is complete at the moment when the core idea that I want to express is expressed clearly. I also use the term conceivable error. It describes the kind of product that has a conceivable outcome despite it being generated by an error. So I know that the technique is wrong. I know that things don't go together like that. But the point is to uncover new ways of seeing and believing what they could become. And you can start to see recognizable architectural elements such as a wall, floor, column, roof, stair, beams, and so on. So when we see these recognizable parts, they start to trigger the preconceived notion of how they normally look like, how they're normally used, and what they're normally used for. And by going against that preconceived notion, I allow myself to create something that appears correct and wrong at the same time. This series started when I was in my first year of my master's degree at the GSD. And for the past 5 years, I made 350 of these objects. They not only recorded my thought processes over the years, but they also gave me something worthy of pursuit. So they did not need to be completely new or life-changing. It was worthy enough that I tried making it in my own way, and whether or not it was successful didn't matter so much to me. And because of the fact that I was still a student when I started this, obviously made a lot of mistakes, still making mistakes today, but overall it led me to a career path that I did not imagine through the power of online publication. Before we go into the publication, I always like to talk about positioning myself. And this is Andrew Zago's diagram that talks about the discipline versus the profession. He would always bring up this diagram during his lectures. And you can see there's a big field of architecture, and then within that there's a profession bubble, but there's a smaller discipline bubble. And if we zoom into this, we can talk about people outside of the profession to be, paper architects like Archigram, Lebbeus Woods, or Superstudio. And on the right side, you would see OMA and other architects that we all admire. And the more outer side we go, like we always talk about corporate firms. And I'm not saying that all corporate firms are outside of the discipline, but I'm talking about the ones that copy-paste apartments. And there's a weird thing about architects being in this circle. A lot of architects start from the outside of the discipline, moves into the profession, but tries to remain in the profession while criticizing the people who are going outside of the discipline. So that gave me a lot of consideration, where should I actually be? And I was trying to be cautious of where I placed this project to be. So for me, architecture anomaly had to be versatile. I wanted it to be positioned in a well-balanced circle. It should intervene both discipline and practice while venturing outside of architecture, given the opportunity. We used to have publications on physical paper, books and magazines that collected the best projects around the world. But of course, with the internet, the publishers started to switch to online magazines and articles so that they could draw more audience. And I believe that, I'm someone who believes that social media has done more bad than good overall. But architecture publication, together with it, became more and more saturated and simplified. It almost seems like architectural imagery became contents for just cheap dopamine. And it's really difficult because there's a lot of confusion, and it's difficult to differentiate the good and bad now. And we're so much overloaded with contents, and there was a point of time when I also felt the responsibility for participating in this degeneracy. But on the bright side, the benefit of having social media is that the idea of self-publication became possible. So I was able to benefit from this trend. And I think it was about 2022 when Instagram started to switch their algorithm system to allow complete strangers to reach out. And of course, overall, this whole change had pros and cons to this. So unlike a traditional route where I was able to kind of use publication as the end product Now the sequence has changed where I was using that as the first step. Obviously, back in the days, paper architects also did this the same thing, but it was much harder for them to reach a large audience without social media. This is technically the first project that I worked on after graduating. This is done with my partner. We were thinking, we had all these projects, we had all these pieces. Where do we actually want to publish it properly? And we thought about doing exhibition and all that, but I also noticed there was not one location that we had our audience targeted. So we thought we should do it online. And because there was a file that I kept, all of the objects are placed in this kind of grid manner. It became like a city. So we thought this could be a context for the online exhibition. We developed the building, one of them, just put some structures in there, put some stairs, put an elevator. We thought we could turn this into almost like a virtual reality tour of the space while displaying some of the objects that we made. And we tried to develop it only because people can interact with it quite closely. So if you walk up close to the elevator, it's going to show some buttons and you can choose which floor to go to. And different floors had different themes of exhibition, different ways of kind of displaying the objects. This was launched on Steam, actually, but it felt really badly because it was way too heavy to run. But it was a fun experiment that we did. But eventually, this type of kind of online publications allowed us to gain clients. Because of the fact that all these anomaly pieces are so functionless, the clients that we came to gain was that they were more trying to look for artistic kind of result in a small scale. So this was one of the clients that I will never forget. This was just 2 years ago. He's a Ukrainian entrepreneur. He has a brand for pizza. If you look at the date on the Instagram, this 2020, and then this is him in 2023. Right, I think it was, April. So it was about 6 months before he came to me for a design commission. But looking at this type of scenario, like this made me crazy. Like, how is this even possible? And also the fact that I wasn't practicing really at the time. I was doing more of my own experiments. And looking at this type of situation, I knew that this type of practice was also possible. So I registered myself as a business in Korea, thanks to this guy. Yeah. And the site that he gave me was on the western end of Ukraine. He had a huge site. This was about 300 meters by 120 meters, the whole field. But he wasn't going to use everything. He wanted me to design a cabin colony. So he wanted me to design 5 different types of cabins, and they should just have their own language. They all should be different. You can see that there's a huge river, and on the other side of the field, you can see that there's a huge cliff as well. This is a video that he sent me. He had a drone footage, and people are peacefully kayaking in the river. This is during war, by the way. This is end of 2023. And he explained to me that they were taking turns to go to the front line. So this was technically possible. So it was their short vacation before they go to the front line. I'll show you the first cabin among the 5, and I started as an A-frame structure, which is the most iconic representation of that program. So the client emphasized on the requirement for balconies facing both the river and the field behind the site. So the shape made a lot of sense to me. It was a very simple form. And as I was kind of deconstructing this triangle it as an extrusion, I wanted to roll the outer surface slightly off angle so that it completes as a spiral, and it extended the edges on front and back. So the bigger the rotation of that surface, the bigger the extension. The openings were kind of also designed to catch more light from the east-facing facade while keeping more solid on the western facade. So the client also thought that this structure should be able to adapt to different heights depending on where he wants to place this. So the bottom structure had to be designed completely separately so that it can vary based on the specific condition. All of these cabins were capped at 30 meters square, ideally each cabin housing about 2 to 3 guests. The floor plan shows quite a typical layout while fulfilling the requirement for having the front and the back balcony and separating the living spaces versus the public spaces. And you can see on the roof plan, the diagonal lines are emphasizing the fold while naturally creating this orthogonal living platforms in between. He said to me, when the war's over, I could stay here for free, but let's hope that it's over soon. Yeah. So this became like a process that I thought became possible. It's not exactly sustainable, but these unbuilt products were gaining clients for me, so I was able to start collaborating with other people as well. And this is another project that I want to show. IPV Delft is a bridge designing company in the Netherlands. They specialize in bridge construction. And this is their most well-known project, Havenring. It's basically a pedestrian and cyclist bridge within a junction. And here they're also using bridge building technology to make such structure. And you know that there's a lot of need for bridges because Netherlands, they have a lot of small waterways. And what they wanted from me, they wanted to expand their business to building watchtowers, observatory towers. And they didn't have a good designer in their team. The boss secretly told me. So he wanted to hire me as a designer. So we didn't have a site. He didn't have a client at the time. So he said, here are some of the buildings we had. Here are some of the structural logic that we like to use. And he sent me all of those drawings. And then he said, just design 4 towers. And I gave him 4 towers. And we were happy about it. And one more thing is that he wanted to consult them on their marketing, actually. And the first thing I told them, the logo needs to go away because it looks like a fitness center. But I don't know, they didn't change it. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, they didn't change it. And the commission itself didn't have a site. So the 4 design, he was going to use them to go around town to look for clients. And he eventually did. So we were able to work on this. Work on this project from last year to, oh. 안 나오는데요? 저기는 나오는데. 백. 저쪽 봐? 아닌데?
저쪽은 나오는데.
그러니까 이게 문제가 아닌 것 같은데. 다시 한번 빼. 된 것 같아요. 네. So yeah, he came back with a client after a year, which was interesting, and it was commissioned by the town. So the site was in Goes, the Netherlands. It was supposed to be a small observatory near a highway. This is at the edge of the town and right next to the highway. And what's interesting about this site was that it was the dike itself. The dikes are usually placed for water, like coastal protection, because Netherlands, you know that the land, the elevation is pretty low. So they have these little structures as a protection. And it was really the only thing that we want to work with because there was really nothing much around, and there were telephone wires on the top left side, you can see, and there's a highway right next to it. So there were some requirement for the height and ability to cross from one side of the dike to the other, and that was it. We had about 6 iterations of design, and we were just thinking of how do we intimately interact with this dike. And one of the simplest scheme became our favorite. It was planks that were placed at the angle of the existing dike as a part of the structure, and cantilevers out into the air. So there are 2 of them, and the planks are not exactly on the same plane so that they can cross each other, leaving some sort of gap. And that gave us naturally, that turned into circulation areas. So on the right side of the dike, you would enter, go up to one of the platforms, and then move to the center part to get to the other side of the deck, and then exit on the other side of the dike. So the circulation made a lot of sense to us. And structurally, the town needed to use CLT for this project. So the 4 planks, IPV Delft did the calculation, and we thought that we needed to add this structure, almost like a shoelace cables that was kind of kind of balancing the 2 structures. So it came out quite naturally sitting on the dike, and of course, when we like the scheme, the clients don't like it. So the clients, they chose a cheaper version. So we're going to construct this next year. And as a performing art, it's not exactly architecture, but I had a really great opportunity last year. This is Simon Stone. He's a film director, theater and film director in Australia. He was going to do his first show in Korea, and he was looking for Korean actors and also Korean designers. He wanted to do Cherry Orchard, which is an original play by Anton Chekhov in 1904. I had no idea what this was until I met him, and he wanted me to make the set design for him. And it was a big challenge because I started looking at his works and what he liked and so on. Instead of going in a more traditional direction like in this photo, a lot of the theater design that I looked at, the more traditional way of doing this is that you show the interior space of the stage. So that people who are looking at it, the audience members, are within the same space. But what Simon liked to do was to completely separate that as a piece of structure. So almost like a piece of architecture sitting on stage, which I thought was interesting, and also understand why he wanted to get an architect to do this. What's interesting here is also the stage rotates slowly for the entire show. So as it rotates, certain parts are facing the audience members, and then it's hiding and revealing different parts of the set. So I thought that was insane. This is a way for architecture to be present in theater while keeping all of the regulations, such as sightlines, in place. Another project that he did is this hotel. He made a section out of this thing. So technically, all of these spaces are now revealed to the public members, and people can choose which actor to follow through for the entire show. So at the end of the show, while all of the acts are happening at the same time, you would have a different experience from someone who looked at a different actor. So that was also a very interesting way that he played the show. The site was here in Seoul, the LG Art Center, designed by Tadao Ando. And before I designed anything, the LG team briefed me very strictly about sightlines, how to make sure that everything is seen from every single seat, because it's almost like a real estate value to them. If they can't sell certain seats because they can't see certain parts of the stage, they're losing money. So the design also had to cater to that, and formally it did affect a lot. So the plan itself showing the extreme right and left seat being able to see to the inside of the building, and also the section showing the top furthest seat and the frontmost seat being able to see the both first and second floor. So there were lots of restrictions to this. in the way I designed the plan. And of course, the most important thing was that this stage should be able to reflect the story of Cherry Orchard, the rise and fall of a family's economic and social status, and the way the actors might move around this structure. The plan is made in concave shape, but initially it was in a convex manner, the opposite. But then the lighting designer came in and said that there was too much reflection, so we had to completely switch that. So things like this, other directing, like the music, how the sound is traveling, how the light is hitting on glass and such, they were extremely important to them. So, and also the circulation, you can see multiple entrances, especially towards the back, where the actors can come in secretly and then appear from the door and such. So this was the schematic design phase, and now we had to make this thing. And the requirement was that we had to fit this thing in 2 shipping containers so that they can ship it around for different sites. And I had a technical director who was guiding me to how we should be able to construct this in 2 days and disassemble it in 1 day. So it was a different requirement for what I was looking at in architecture. But it felt like building a really big model instead, because there was no need for waterproofing, no need for insulation, and the finishes were extremely thin. And this is a mock-up model. You can see that the staircase portion is completely out of CNC cut high-density foam. And the man standing right outside the building, that's James Farcon. He's the lighting designer for this project, and he did such an amazing job. I was quite shocked what lighting can do to architecture, especially in this type of environment. And when all of these things came together, the music, the lighting direction, the actors, and also special effects, it made architecture, it exaggerated the power of architecture. That was my last slide. Thank you.
Any questions? Come on. Jay, do you have any questions?
Thank you for your lectures, and actually I'm really interested about your graph and your kind of way to why you design architectural anomaly. And my question is, you kind of starting making your architecture based on not form, but form and spaces in order to make your anomaly finally. So before you are doing that, actually, I'm more interested in how would you play with the different elements of the architecture as an intuition or some logical way, or some kind of you're using some typological thinking, etc.
There was a part of the lecture that I did not show here, which is the fact that the first school that I went to in Singapore, from our first year, we start using Revit.
Yeah.
And we were never trained with Rhino or SketchUp, all these tools that allow us to think in terms of mass. Everything was done in like parts. So I think that has a big influence on the way I see pieces and elements. So the way I would construct my anomalies, I would see them as separate entities, and I would try to assemble them in different ways. But I think a lot of the techniques that you were curious about was coming from SciArc. SciArc had a lot of, we weren't allowed to design boxes. Yeah, that was illegal there. So I think we were forced to train with form. So I think putting them together with different languages, different keywords, that was training that came from SciArc. Thank you.
Also, by doing that, I think I was really interested in looking at AA City. So you kind of curated all kind of your works on the making new city. So is there any kind of way or intention to show the city by put all together out of new has been designed? Because you might have some kind of intention on how to play with that in order to maybe, I think all of your piece of the work is, I feel like architecture element itself. So I think something more like door, something is more like living door, something more like roof, etc. So is there any intention or a way to show more about city looking or showing something based on that?
I honestly think they should just remain sightless. The city that I showed, it was more of a post-rationalization. I didn't really intend it to be a city, but it was just like one of the Rhino files that I used to collect everything, so that when I lose the files, I would still recover them. But it was a happy accident. That made me think a lot about like context or kind of like isolated world within itself. But it didn't really do much for my career. It was just like one beautiful image that came about. And that became a context for this virtual space that we were about to design. Because that virtual space, it felt kind of out of place. So we thought that specific Rhino model could just be a context for the project.
Yep. Hey, it was a very interesting presentation. Thank you very much. I have two questions, just from curiosity. Like the first one, I have a very specific set of clients, and I'm wondering, like the project that or people that you're designing for. Could you tell us like a story? How did you find or how they found you? Because there is like a narrative behind like was there sonography and other projects. And the second question is just completely different. Like they're coming from ETH and Switzerland and some other European countries. There is a lot talking about sustainability as a key topic with how we construct things, not only how we design things. And they almost like hammer to the wall. Like you cannot just produce just because it's cool, you know. And the question is not for your work, but how do you see those American schools? Do they change over time, over composition, how we design things, versus how you really construct and build things, or it's pretty much the same and all it is about the construction engineering? Thanks.
Thank you. I get all of my clients from Instagram. They don't DM me, but then they would email me saying that they saw me from Instagram and then they want to do something with it. But for the case of the theater project, Simon wanted to collaborate with me, but then the LG production team, they were very concerned because I was not a theater set designer, and I was way too young to, to handle such big project. But yeah, Simon was able to convince them, so I was very thankful that I was able to do with it. But the second part, I think that's a challenge for I think most young architects, like trying to transition from these things from ideas to realities. I don't have that much experience with that. So I like to collaborate a lot. Like the IPV Delft collaboration was very fun because they taught me a lot about structures and assembly. And because of the fact that I didn't really have like a long-term period of training under companies. So I'm trying to learn it myself. So it's really difficult. So what I'm trying to do is to learn it through collaborations. So even right now, current projects that I'm working with, they're always done in collaboration, so that I can kind of help with my flaws, Thank you. Was there a question from YouTube? Hee Jun Lee wanted to ask a YouTube question.
He's watching it, but
He's watching?
Only 3 are watching.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for presentations. It was really insightful. I have a question. So, like, most of the projects seem like really abstract, and they seem like they don't work with like a certain like a site context. So maybe take up like projects like like you just showed us like in Ukraine or like is it Netherlands?
Netherlands, yeah.
So when you deal with projects on site, how do you like deal with having to like go from designing in Rhino or something where like no gravity exists, like you just told us about the CLT project that you want to do. So how do you like go from like working purely on computer to then sort of like considering all the factors like in person?
You know, at the start of the presentation, I said that I'm not a very humanistic person. So I know that a lot of architects are concerned about this, like, the social issues, the environmental issues. They're just not of my interest. I like to just think of things in the... I just showed you a few the examples of failures of O architects. And that's what I'm pursuing, actually. I'm trying to just study down to core what it means to design something and what are some of the available techniques and ways of representation. But it doesn't necessarily, for me, that's not the number one issue. So I tend to rely that on my collaborators. If they're concerned about it, I try to tackle it. But if they're not concerned about it, I wouldn't care to, because that's not my biggest priority. But I know it's important. I know it's important to care about these things. But yes, that's why maybe I'm not getting any clients from like city context,
Okay. Any question? You can do it in Korean.
한국어 잘합니다.
Come on.
Yes.
Must be brave. Any questions? No? No? Let's finish? No? Okay, let's finish. No question? I'm also not a humanistic person. I'm a materialist.
Glad to hear that.
I'm following. Yeah,
That's
so,
why I think
yeah, so I just really enjoyed it. So. No, I think. Yep.
So what would be then the message that you would leave to, let's say, young architects?
A message?
Like a message that you want to leave to young architects. They should care about, let's say,
Oh.
they should all like do design in an individualistic way without taking care of the other. So
Well-
what would be like your recommendation to young architectural students?
Honestly, I think just follow your interests. If your interests are aligned with more humanistic, more realistic, more materiality, sure, go ahead. But don't make me do it. Just follow what you like. I think that.
So
Yeah.
you believe that architecture has no effect on society, or no? Or
Well, I believe the projects that I'm working on don't have the effect directly as a built product, but rather the online presence itself, I think, can have an effect, but right in a different way. Like, they don't have to be built. I don't want to build my anomalies. They're terrible to exist in society, but they exist as ideas. I think maybe that can influence other people to make something better. I don't know. Yeah. So yeah, follow your interests, I think. Yeah. Thank you.
되게
Yeah.
맞는 말씀이라고 생각하는데 제 생각에 요즘 학생들의 고민은 자기 인터레스트가 뭔지도 잘 모르고 그걸 어떻게 해야 알 수 있는지에 대한 방법에 대한 궁금증이 많은 것 같아요. 혹시 뭐 본인한테 있었던 계기라든지 하셨던 노력 같은 거 있으시면 공유해 주시면 좋겠어요.
So the question is that a lot of young students are having trouble finding their own interest, and how did I do it, and what's the advice to them? I think it takes effort. I don't think it just comes to you. So, like for example, you wouldn't know that you like to eat certain type of food until you try it. So, they need to try something. For example, I know a lot of students like to take the same professor over and over within the school period, and I don't recommend that because you're limiting yourself. Maybe some other professors might give you a different insight that was truly your interest, and you're missing out on the opportunities. So I tell my students as well, just take different studios. Don't take my class. Yeah, that's my student.
I have more questions. Actually, I'm really interested in looking at the new paths to be architects from your another alternatives, and your online publication and dealing with the media is really interesting to start your office rather than starting working in the office. Right? So I'm really interested, and my question is how so far maybe you have done that path, and my question is how would that path lead you to maybe come to some way? So have you thought, are you still following the way, or you are finding something you need to back up, or you need to go back? So it makes really different things happening, maybe in project, or you are kind of getting prior, etc. And maybe there could be some kind of difficulties as well, especially in society in Korea. So I would listen more about that, please. Yeah.
I personally don't think this route is safe, like for anyone, including myself. Like
It's not safe as well.
Yeah, that's true. No architecture route is safe. Yes, you're right. Yeah, but I think the safe way is to really have the right working experience. I think I was only able to do this because of due to Instagram. That's the only reason. Yeah. Otherwise, if I was born just like 20 years earlier, I wouldn't have this life. So even 2 years ago, like 2023, I was also considering myself going back to the America to get a proper job, have built my career from there, to get licensed and such. But now instead of doing that, now that I'm working alone with my partner, we have to rely on different types of learning. The learning curve is much steeper as well. And like I said before, for the previous question, I have to collaborate a lot because I don't have the ability to do everything on my own. I think that's one risk that that one should know before taking this route. Yeah.
So if so, have you thought any other options? Before getting architecture education, someone taking online education.
Online education.
So because things are changing all the time. So nowadays we need to think about how kind of architectural education should be done more than education should be different, I think. So you are the generation starting publication after you graduate, right? But some maybe are thinking, no, I want to do architectural education online publication first. So someone having that kind of idea here, could you say some kind of your thinking?
Really, anyone? My recommendation is don't do it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think having the right working experience is a good thing. Yeah, I understand why architects peak at a very later age. It's because of the experience, and it's very difficult to start something on your own, I think. Especially in Korea, I have much more clients from outside. Also maybe because Korea is a little more conservative. A lot of the clients that I met who are Korean, they thought I was way too young. So those are challenges, realistic challenges that I'm facing. So yeah, get licensed. Yeah, we have one more. Yeah.
인스타그램으로 상품화시키는 거에 대해서는 건축 말고도 옷 브랜드라든지 그런 거를 많이 판매를 하잖아요. 근데 옷은 그냥 브랜드
이미지 같은 거로 이제 홍보를 하는 것 같은 느낌인데 건축가로서 이제 인스타그램을 통해서 클라이언트를 모았을 때도 그런 브랜드 이미지를 통해서 사람들이 모이는 것에는 다른 이유가 있는 건지 좀 여쭤보고 싶습니다.
제가 시작한 이유 아니면
사람들이 어떤 걸 보고
어떤 걸 보고?
클라이언트로서 보는지.
do I have to translate?
Nice to
He's asking us, a lot of the clients that come to me, they're looking at the products that I'm showing on Instagram. So he's asking what are the things that they are attracted to get me to do the commission. And I think my answer will be that they're looking for. I admire my clients because they value beauty over, marketing some of the floor areas and such. I think they value design. That's I think the number one reason. They also see potential in some of these structures that didn't make sense, and a lot of them, including like Simon. Simon is a very avant-garde kind of director. And he was looking for something new. Maybe other architects did not offer something new. So I think he saw some of the potential in the works that I've done, and he was imagining that to become the stage. So yeah, I think me leaving room for imagination, it's always like pure white abstract, no material, no site, nothing, no scale. And I think that helps complete the rest of the story for the clients to imagine. So I think that was why they would come to me. Yeah.
Thank you for the lecture. I also see the play 벚꽃동산 last summer.
Thank you.
It was very centered because I love musical and music, and it's hard to see people who design stage and architecture both. So I wonder how you relate to stage design, and also wonder about most difference from architecture. And also, I also want to know how you choose architectural elements or furnitures inside, depending on scenario and scene in the film.
Well, as you saw in the drawings, they were very strict about sidelines because that's the only thing that's making them money. If they couldn't sell a portion of the seat because of the fact that they can't look into the stage, that would have been a problem. But because Simon liked to do revolving stage, like turning stage, but we didn't have that budget for this production. So I had to figure out a way to fulfill all of the sightlines within that building. So that was the biggest challenge, I think. In terms of, well, difference, you would have seen it because you watched the show. It's the way people circulate. So it's very frontal focused, and the back, it's a big mess. There's a bunch of wires and all these mechanics behind the set that you wouldn't see. But those were not really my job. I just needed to offer them the space to make sure that all of these things operated well. What was the second question? Sorry.
How you choose?
Oh, the furniture. Right.
Depending on scenario.
Yeah. Just for the context, there was a scene where they would completely clear out all of the furniture inside and turn it into like an empty space. And with that moment, there was a huge bed on the second floor, if you noticed. Yes, that needed to be disassembled somehow and put away within like a minute. So that was a challenge that I was tasked to do. We had to design the bed frame, and the bed itself needed to be folded in half to be stored inside, like a storage between this triangle. So there was a hidden cabinet right behind the bed. So they could open it up during that minute and put everything in there. And I had to make sure that all of the furniture that I choose needed to fit the exit behind. Yeah, that was the basis, like how I choose the furnitures. And it also needed to be completely white, which was very difficult to do. Yeah.
are there any like sources of like inspiration for your forms? From what I see, you don't seem like you don't follow like star architects, or like you don't seem like you like star architects, or the ideas. So is there any kind of like source of inspiration you turn to for like all these abstract ideas?
Those are very dangerous assumptions, though. Well, I like to look at things outside, like furniture products, just because of the fact that, yeah, I had this professor, Eric Moss, back at SciArc. He was probably still my favorite architect, and he said to me one day, like just looking at precedents, you look at precedents to avoid what was done before, and that really hit me hard. And like, because when we were students, we look at the precedent to copy what they did, yeah. But obviously, we're not going to do it better than them. But the fact that he said that, and that hit me hard, and I was able to kind of, okay, I look at this, that exists, so I shouldn't do that. I was trying to avoid it. And the only way to seek something new, I thought, was just outside the discipline of architecture, just looking at furniture designs, products, and so on.
Okay. Oh, last question.
Thank you for the interesting lecture. I'm just wondering about your view on architectural education. Do you think your alternative path in your career is a reflection in your education, not in your education, in the way you educate students?
I was at Hongdae 2 years ago, but then I kind of moved to K1 University of Art and Design. And one of the reasons why I like it there is because they have the maximum freedom. It's a 3-year course, so they don't have a specific curriculum dedicated for accreditation. So I was able to do more experimental things in the studio and as well as the classes. I have a student right behind. What do you think? Maybe he hasn't done enough studios with me, but I do like to do something that's not so common. I would like to try something different, because I think, especially for Korean schools, I have a feeling that a lot of the studios are restricted by the accreditation system. And even though the professors want to do something crazy, like I think they seem to be restricting themselves as well. So I heard that also some of the schools are switching to vertical studio systems or option studio systems so that they can choose some of the professors with specific topics in their 4th year. I think that will be really great for the students, just so that they can kind of experiment with their interest. But yeah, I don't have much experience in teaching. This is my 3rd year teaching, so I really can't. Maybe I criticize a little too much, but yeah, that's what I think right now for Korean architecture.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Time to work, man.